Right now, though, let's talk about where we are with the King dealing with Andrew. Of course, the fallout of the relationship with Jeffrey Epstein between Mandelson and Jeffrey Epstein, basically almost bringing down, could eventually bring down the Prime Minister, but concerns for bringing down, well, the whole monarchy. Some US politicians saying this could bring down the monarchy. But what do you make of the King saying he stands ready to support the police in their probe into his brother amid claims that he leaked confidential documents to his paedophile friend Jeffrey Epstein? Well, let's talk about this with Norman Baker. He's a former Lib Dem MP, but he's also author of And What Do You Do? What the Royal Family Don't Want You to Know, an investigation into the Royal Family's finances. Very good morning to you, Norman.
Oh, Julia, nice to speak to you again.
Nice to talk to you. Well, with your hat on as effectively a royal author, but not the usual kind of royal authors. Most royal authors, they're basically sort of going, oh, aren't they wonderful? Look at some pretty pictures of Kate in a dress. That's kind of where we are. You very much take a very different attitude about basically the complete black hole of Buckingham Palace and the royal family's finances and who owns what and who pays what tax and whatever. Using from that perspective, when you saw the statement from the King saying that he and the Queen, they stand by for Buckingham Palace to support this police probe into Andrew, whether it's about anything involving any sexual misdeeds, and there have been allegations of that, which he denies, or into leaking these confidential documents to Epstein, which, if these Epstein files are true, would certainly be a crime. But of course, we don't know if they're true, and there's a police probe into that, and he's denied all wrongdoing. But what do you make of all of that?
Well, look, I mean, I think the royal family and the King and the Queen Elizabeth before him did as little as possible. The objective in their strategy was to say nothing and hope it would all go away. Then when they had to say something, they said, well, it's Andrew. He's been ring-fenced, nothing to do with us. We're innocent. And actually, it's not quite as simple as that, because the questions build up for them. I mean, a picture of Andrew with Epstein in New York Central Park emerged in 2011, I think, 15 years ago. What was the royal family doing then? They must have interviewed Andrew at that point and said, what are you doing with a convicted sex offender? Did they do that? We don't know. Then there's the £12 million payoff to Virginia Giuffre. Who paid for that? The allegation was the Queen paid for that. We don't know if it's true or not. But anyway, is that the way to deal with these victims, is to just pay them off? Is that endorsed by the royal family? And the picture of Andrew and Virginia Giuffre, which clearly is real, notwithstanding Andrew's attempts to say it was false, did they not interview him about that? So they've done as little as possible for 15 years. They're behind public opinion all the way through.
Well, that's it. It's been very much a view. And I would say, the King has acted very, very quickly and abruptly, far more so than Keir Starmer did in terms of the issues when he became king. He wasn't king. His late mother was queen. Andrew, by all accounts, her favourite son. And certainly there does seem to be a view that, well, just obviously Andrew would go in and say to his mother, oh, no, it's all lies, mother, it's all lies, and this would be believed. Now, we've spoken to guests in the last couple of weeks who were senior figures, press secretary to the late Queen, Di Davies, the former head of Royal Protection, talking about, so these police officers who close protection, they're with Prince Andrew. They know where he is. They know whether he's staying at a convicted paedophile's home or not. They're there. They report back where they are. There are records of all of this, and that this stuff would undoubtedly, both men said, would undoubtedly go up the ranks and would have undoubtedly reached the Queen's principal private secretary. Now, the question is whether the private secretary would then tell the late Queen about this or not, or was she shielded by it? But certainly, if you're signing off best part of 10 million quid to a woman who your son has apparently never met, you might be asking questions. Do you think that there has, certainly under the late Queen, been an urge to cover this up? Was it for the sake of Andrew, the Queen's favourite son, or was it for the firm? Because we know from all the revelations we've had over the years that the firm comes first. The institution comes first.
Yes. Well, I mean, you can pick any scandal in the last 100 years, and the reality is always that the royal family tries to ignore the scandal, then you try and cover it up as best they can and try and move on. And they'll respond to the public if they have to, but giving as little ground as necessary. That's what they did, for example, with Diana. That's what they did all the way through. That's the standard response. When they see a crack in the wall, they don't mend the wall, they read paper over it and hope it'll all go back to normal. That's what they do. But on the police point, there's a very interesting one here, Julia. As part of my research for my newest book, by the way, quick plug for Royal Mint National Debt, I asked the Metropolitan Police through a Freedom of Information Act, where their detail was with Andrew on the night he was either at Tramp nightclub or at Peach Express in Woking. And they must know where he was because they keep records.
Yeah.
They won't tell me. Now, if he was really at Pizza Express, why doesn't Andrew get those logs published to prove he was there?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. We know that information exists. Well, there's been also a big issue of the fact that the Metropolitan Police are, by all accounts, looking into allegations that a second woman has made claims that she was trafficked for sex with Prince Andrew, as he then was. And we've also got these allegations that are contained in the latest Epstein files where if they're genuine documents showing for information he was getting as a UK trade envoy being forwarded straight, I mean, within minutes to Epstein, very similar to what the allegations are about Peter Mandelson when he was business secretary during the economic crisis. But we know that when the allegations were made by Virginia Giuffre, very serious allegations that as a 17-year-old girl, she was trafficked to the UK to have sex with Andrew. There was a picture, etc. We now know for sure the Metropolitan Police at no point interviewed Andrew about that. Does that suggest to you there is an institutional cover-up at a much higher establishment level? It's not just the palace. There is also a general sort of, the establishment will just try to make things go away. And Andrew has been protected all that time.
Well, not just Andrew, the royal family generally. The police don't want to take on the royal family. And in fact, there's a chapter in my book called Nothing to See Here, Move Along, which is their attitude towards anything to do with the royal family. You look at that case when Charles was caught red-handed, in my view, promising somebody help with their passport application in return for money for his good causes.
And a bag of cash, literally a carrier bag of cash.
Yes. Sorry about the helicopter going above. Yes.
That's okay.
A huge bag of cash. I mean, it was so obvious that was a quid pro quo. It was in writing from Michael Fawcett, and I reported that to the police. But they did nothing about that, And
also, once that there was an investigation of some sort, but then once the late Queen died, and Charles became king, that did seem to disappear. That story. Everything
disappears. I have no confidence in Metropolitan Police or any other police force to investigate these matters properly. As regards the suggestion that Prince Andrew, who was passing information on his capacity as trade envoy, well, again, in my book, there's information about suggestions, which are also in the Mail on Sunday, that he did similar things to pass on information to other entrepreneurs he was taking on his overseas trips with them. Yeah. So this is not new in a sense.
No. There have been allegations, and again, it wasn't just the photo of him in New York in Central Park with Epstein that came out in 2011 that forced him out of that role. There were lots of allegations about his friends with a convicted gun dealer and Gaddafi's son, and it's very unsavoury. I mean, again, he's never met a dodgy billionaire he doesn't like, as I've said many times. Look, neither you nor I are staunch royalists. A lot of my audience are. The majority of the public are. They loved the late Queen. I had huge respect for how she carried out her duties in terms of putting, the job ahead of everything else, of being the leader of the Queen of this country. Charles is not as popular, never will be as popular as the late Queen was, I don't think. But a lot of people would say. A lot of my audience go, he's done a good job. He's done his best. It's his brother. He's acted as soon as he had the power to act, to strip away titles, take away his big fancy place at Royal Lodge. Yes, he's given him somewhere to live, but that's basically the words of the phrase of the weekend was contain him, keep him quiet, out of reach at Sandringham. Do you think it's legitimate to criticise? Do you think that the king himself has a case to answer?
I don't think they've been as quick. I don't think he has been as quick as he could have been. And I said he'd have been part of the discussions in the last 15 years. So he's not been as quick as he has been.
You think he would have known about all of this?
Of course. I think, of course, he knew about it. It would be impossible as Prince of Wales not to know about that. And I think there are other issues, of course, Julia, as we discussed before, about royal finances and so on. So it's not a question really, in a way, as to whether you want a monarchy or whether you don't want a monarchy. The question is, do you want this particular monarchy or do you want a different monarchy? And the reality is that the monarchies elsewhere in Europe, by and large, are much, much cheaper, are much, much slimmer, and much less inured, in the Norwegians except at the moment, in scandal as our one is.
Is there an element that, of course, if you're going to have a family that you say that the highest family in the land is the royal family, and it's going to be chosen by who people marry and what kids they have, you're going to get some wrong uns, you're going to get some good uns, you're going to get some wrong uns.
And do you know what? That's an argument for a republic, because you can get someone on the throne like Elizabeth II, who people do think was diligent and did her best for the nation. But you can also get Edward VIII, who was basically a Nazi. You know, you don't choose who you get on the throne. It's Buckingham's turn almost. And let's remember that if Charles had died before he gave, before Harry and William were born, we have King Andrew on the throne now.
Well, indeed, Andrew is still technically, even despite the titles being taken away, he's still technically 8th in line to the throne. So, you know, let's not have everyone on the same plane, that's for sure. Norman Baker, very interesting to talk to you, author of And What Do You Do, What the Royal Family Don't Want You to Know. I'm going to get Tom